Hey everyone, welcome back to the Adventures Less Traveled podcast. I'm your host, John Schwenk. I'm sitting here with Sean Tracy. Sean and I actually met on my bike trip about 3 years ago in 2019 in Talkeetna, Alaska. Sean has quite an interesting background. He was a U.S. Navy search and rescue swimmer. He's no stranger to the cold. He went to school at University of Alaska at Fairbanks. He did an incredible achievement by going from the lowest point in the continental U.S. to the highest, from Death Valley to Denali. And on top of that, keeps raising the bar, and he does ultra marathons. And on top of that, he also has a distillery in eastern Pennsylvania. So thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, man. My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Yeah. During that bike trip, I was just kind of looking for a hostel and then randomly came across Sean, and it was Sean and some of his buddies that were just finishing
the test run.
So what exactly was the Denali 135?
Yeah, so Denali 135 was sort of a invention, believe it or not, conjured up by my then 8-year-old daughter. Having gone to school, University of Alaska, having been up to do Denali and visiting Alaska a lot, I'd always gone back and forth. My family, I've got a lot of family up there. And one summer, my daughter and I went up to go camping and just do a whirlwind trip around the state. And at one point, we're camping on Denali Highway, and she's heard me mention ultra marathons of 135-mile length over the years. There's Brazil, there's Badwater, there's the one up in Minnesota. But anyhow, she had heard that distance mentioned before, the 135, and so she's like, Dad, you should do an ultra marathon on Denali Highway. It's exactly 135 miles long. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. Ding. Wait a minute. Kid's got a great idea. Arrowhead. I'm sorry. Long day. Arrowhead 135. So there's a bunch of 135s. And I said, yeah, she's got a point. And, not having been in the ultra thing for too long, I've sort of made it a rule after I started a little company doing ultras that I wouldn't offer a race unless I did it myself. So I was like, that's cool, honey. And we came home and I thought about it for a while, and I decided that if I was going to do that, I wanted to test run it first. So I got a friend together that I'd run the Vermont 100 with, and I said, hey, man, I got this harebrained idea. I want to run across Denali Highway. It's never been done. You want to go? And he's like, yeah, count me in. We found another buddy to drive a support vehicle, and the next year we were up there, in Paxton, Alaska, looking west 135 miles going, oh shit. It was kind of a crazy year too, because they had like insane wildfires. So the air was absolutely choked with smoke, and we couldn't even breathe at the starting line. It was just so bad. And I had been there before several times, and I knew that the Alaska range in all its majesty was right there, but you couldn't see any of the mountains. And I kept promising, I'm like, I swear to God, there's mountains there and they're spectacular, but you couldn't see like almost your hand in front of your face. So anyhow, we ran it. Bill, the other guy that ran it with me at mile 90 something, blew his meniscus. Rock started out and we stayed together and hobbled the 30, 40 miles to the finish, and we got it done. And my mission was to get it done under 48 hours, which is what I would expect the race cutoff to be. So we pulled it off, and it was a great time, had a great time. We put a website together and got some local sponsors. We got Denali Brewing Company. We got some cool local sponsors on board. And we were all set to go. We got some people registered, and COVID hit. So we had to put the brakes on, and then we waited another year. But by that time, we had more people signed up. And fast forward, the first running, which was in 2021, went off without a hitch. It was spectacular. Weather was absolutely phenomenal, and everybody had a great time. And then we just ran it again for the second time this past year, and we've already got just a bunch of people already signing up. But it's a cool race because we do the 135-mile full Denali Highway, and then we have a half version, which is basically 100K. And this year we're adding a 50K, which will be fun for people that want to get home and
like
watch.
Me.
Yeah,
get
home, watch Netflix, and eat some tacos after running a 50K. So it's fun, and it allows me to share my love of a very special place that intimately, having ridden your bike through there.
Sure.
With whoever's willing to trust me with that. Yeah. So it's really cool.
And something that we'll get to in a little bit, but Talkeetna specifically was the spot where on this Death Valley to Denali trip that you did way back, I believe Talkeetna was kind of your launching point for the mountaineering expedition. So,
Yep.
right. So I'll let that sink in for the listeners. But the reason that you're here, this is actually the first show in Charlotte, in person. And Sean is actually on his way to a race down in Alabama. So he's not a stranger to these ultra endurance, ultra long distance marathons. So the thing down in Alabama, what is that?
Yeah. So
how
that's
does
the
that compare?
Pinhoti 100. It's a 100-mile trail race. It's I think the 15th running of, and it's pretty highly regarded as a pretty decent, tough trail race. Similar in a lot of ways to the Vermont 100, which was my first 100. So I haven't done too many of them. I've done a bunch of 50s, a bunch of 50Ks, but need to up my game on some of these hundos. So yeah, we're heading down, and Bill's going to be pacing me through the night, which is kind of fun. And that's 4 or 5 hours from here. So this works out great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I'm psyched. I had some medical challenges in the past year. COVID kicked my ass, turned my heart upside down. Tore my meniscus, had to keep up with Bill, got that scoped. That's all fixed. So I'm feeling really strong, feeling ready to go, ready to rock this race.
Well, I'm hoping by the time this episode's released, we'll have you
nice.
up on the leaderboard.
Nice. There. Yeah. Well, I don't know about leaderboard. The finisher board, man. I'm good.
Yeah. So the thing I think that is worth stressing is like you kind of the Denali 135 was like your baby. Like you started that. All your effort went into that. So I'm happy that the second race happened, because from there it's only just gonna escalate and networking and it's gonna get bigger and bigger, and
it's such a spectacular setting. I mean, there's few places I've seen in the world, having been around, that are just so vast and just magnificent, remote settings where you can truly just get inside yourself and be part of your environment. It's this weird dichotomy, but I mean, it just goes on forever. I mean, you have vistas that are 100 miles long. Similar to Death Valley in a lot of ways. It's a very spiritual place. And people that go there and spend time there, especially during endurance events, all are connected to those places for the rest of their lives. I mean, I was from Badwater, and I know the Badwater runners and Chris Kosman and his races, all the Badwater races. He's built an amazing family of adventure endurance athletes over the years. And I think Alaska will get there eventually. It has its different challenges. There's some wildlife, concerns. But knock on wood, they're, typically all at a distance. We see critters out there. But one of the nice things about the Denali race is we run it on summer solstice.
Nice.
So
sun never sets.
And the tough part for me and a lot of runners, ultra runners, is night.
Right.
You want to just lay down and sleep after running for however many hours, but not an issue in Alaska. You just keep on going.
That's awesome, man. Now I guess it's worth prying open the box that is ultra endurance. So, now how did that kind of come to be? Like, was it? I'm assuming you can't just like all of a sudden, like I can only run about 3 to 4 miles. So I can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to do the Denali 135 next year. Or is that, do you see people that do that?
So you think.
Yeah.
You could run a lot further than that, John.
Okay.
I mean, and
that's what I mean. Like, I don't know anything about the sport.
I mean, it's, having done some crazy stuff in the Navy, physical hard stuff that tests you and pushes you. That's always been part of my makeup since I was in my teens. And, learning about this crazy world of endurance athletes, I don't care if they're rowers or climbers or runners, there's a whole group of people in yourself. You hop on your bike from New Jersey and say, I'm going to go to Alaska. A lot of people think that's just plain nuts.
Right.
But a lot of those people could also do this. And it's just a matter of taking that first step. So I just want to experience as much as I can, while we're here. And these ultras that, some people have said it's like life in a day. You experience the lowest of lows and the highest of highs. And in a very short period of time, we were just talking before about how cool it is also to be able to show up at these races and toe the line with the best of the best. I'm a solid back of the pack guy. I mean, I am solid back of the pack.
Yeah.
But to be able to toe the line with, some of the best out there and fist bump each other, be running the same course, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Sure.
Everybody's experiencing the same thing, and everybody's there to sort of encourage everyone else on as well. So, that's sort of where that came to be. And then my Death Valley to Denali thing was sort of it's kind of an interesting intro into the endurance sport world, because at the time I didn't even know about ultra marathons. And I just needed to recalibrate. We all have some ups and downs in life, and I had gone through some of those, and I needed a chance to recalibrate. So I came up with this harebrained idea to do Death Valley to Denali. Yeah.
Now, before we get there, it kind of in the weeds of the ultra world. What does training look like? Like when is it because I imagine that is like a full-time lifestyle thing where like you have to, like how many miles do you do? Like what's a diet like? Like how does one like prepare on more of like a granular level or like for training?
Yeah, good question. Everybody's different, right? And the races will also often dictate what your training is. The road races are different than trail races, and hot races are different than, Arrowhead or, some of these cold winter races. So, you take the environment, the time of the year into play. Mileage is key. There's pretty standard sort of protocols as far as number of miles training wise. Like for me, a rule of thumb is for about 2 to 3 weeks out prior to race day, I try and match in that week the number of miles that I'll be running. So 3 weeks ago, my high mileage week was 100 miles with a couple long runs back to back, like a 20 and then a 30. It's mostly time on feet, that we're not looking to break I'm not looking to break any records. And my interest in ultras, I never thought I'd be doing them. I ran a marathon 7 years ago, and it was horrible. It was the most painful thing, and I didn't have fun. But afterwards, I was like, I'm going to give that another shot. There's things I can do to better my time. And I did a couple more. I did Philly. I did a couple local marathons. And I realized in short order that I wasn't going to get much faster at 50, whatever I was, 3. But what I was getting was more stubborn. And I was like, this is great. And at the time, I had heard a buddy of mine who's like, yeah, I ran this 100-miler. And I was like, what? So I started looking for races. And I jumped right from... I think I did a marathon, then a 50-miler, then a couple of 50Ks, and then I was right into a 100-miler. And it's true. It's just about perseverance. 90% of it, I believe, is in your head, because when you're out there doing it, inevitably things fall apart, physically, nutrition-wise, weather, and it's just a problem-solving exercise. And I like that. I enjoy that. And that's that's the other side of me, is trying to sort of work through those things. But I have no aspiration to winning anything. I just want to get to the finish line and look back and say, yeah, I did that, and do it with a bunch of really good people. And the other cool thing about ultras is you have crews most of the time, and you have volunteers, and it's just this big, giant, arms open,
everyone wants to help out
community. Yeah, it's just awesome. It's really cool.
Like, I don't think people realize how mentally tough they can be if they really dig deep, and like that's what's crazy. It's like not everyone's different physically, but everyone, if they really try or they really dig deep, they can all bring out that mental fortitude.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I sure, I respect the rockets, the youngsters that are burning it up and setting, course records, and that it's super impressive, and I have a ton of respect. But I equally have a ton of respect for the people that are, that pushing the golden hour, coming in with 10 minutes left before the cutoff. Or I had a runner who ran my first Denali 135, and she's out there running all kinds of races, Natalie Bickers. And Natalie just last year did the Moab 240, 2 seconds left on the clock. 2 seconds. Natalie, you're a rock star. So, those people are out there toughing it out for twice as long as the speedsters. So, it's a whole different mental game. And the other cool thing is there's a lot of, older people up there. I'm knocking on 60 and I just got into it. And it seems like there's a lot of people my age, late 40s, early 50s that, they're not going to go crush it. Maybe they're not even going to get to Boston, get their BQ, but they're stubborn and they're determined and they have a lot of passion and life's experience and histories that just all culminate in this drive to just get stuff done and just get out there and make it happen. So,
it's very unique compared to other sports in the sense that like you do get a huge range of athletes that participate in it. So after this race in Alabama, do you have anything else on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm gonna go tune up my winter endurance skills up in northern Wisconsin at the Tuscobia Winter Ultra, and that's you pull a sled, you got all your gear. It's sort of self-sufficient thing, but that's a test run for a kind of a secret project I'm working on up in Alaska for later in the winter. So if all the planets align, maybe we'll do a talk next year.
Yeah. He's giving me food for another episode here.
Yeah, man.
So, all right. So let's dig into this Death Valley to Denali trip here.
Right
so
on.
What, how did that come? I guess start with the basics. What was it purely from a like 20,000 foot view?
Yeah. So Death Valley to Denali was the first and to date only human powered expedition from the lowest, hottest point in North America to the highest, coldest point in North America. All said and done, it was a 3,611 mile mountain bike trip. Quasi mountain bike. It was more like a Franken bike. I had slicks on it. Back tire was a mountain bike tire, but 3,611 miles on the mountain bike, about probably a 70-mile walk into base camp. Most people climbing Denali fly into base camp, about 99% of them. And then a climb of the mountain. And it was covered the entire spectrum, desert, arid, crazy hot. Not as hot as, like some of the summer races there because I left in March. But it was pretty awesome experience. And again, good people. I found some people that were willing to go along with my harebrained idea. Met some amazing sort of really historical first-time sort of adventures out there as well on the mountain. And it's been to some degree, it's been kind of a backseat driving force to a lot of the things I've done in my life, both business and, just pleasure, adventure-wise since. Yeah.
Cool
thing.
And so when you were doing this, was the mentality race? Like, let's get there, let's do it in record time, because it did end up being a record, but was that the goal from the get-go, or was it, I just want to kind of do this?
Well, it's funny. The idea came to be, I had some ups and downs in life. We all do. And I just felt like a need to, career-wise, relationship-wise, and I needed to sort of recalibrate. And I said, I need to just do something really hard where it's just me in the road in the tundra or something. I need to put something together where I can recalibrate. So I'm going to go climb Denali. I'd gone to University of Alaska. I could see it on a clear day, 100 miles away from Fairbanks. And I was like, someday. So I decided I wanted to do that. And, I was looking into it and I'd seen that a bunch of people did it. And I said, well, I want to do it a little different. I want to somehow figure out a way to do it different. And I remembered seeing a movie there at University of Alaska about an Australian guy, maybe it was a Kiwi, I think it was Australian, that climbed Everest from sea level. So the opening shot was him like coming out of the Bay of Bengal. And he literally walked across India and climbed the mountain. So he's the only guy that's ever done the entire mountain from sea level all the way up. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it from sea level. So I made a couple calls to rangers at Denali National Park, the Mountaineering Rangers. And they're like, sorry, dude, some guy already did it from Anchorage, which is right down the road. I was like, shit. So it bummed me out for a while because I was really latching onto that as my sort of self prescribed therapy. Yeah. And I was bummed out. And I was like, well, what can I do? You know, I got to do something different, but I still want it to be a Denali. And I was like, well, maybe there's someplace lower than Denali. And I remembered from, I don't know, elementary school geography class that there was Death Valley, and I had been through when I was a kid driving back with my parents through the country. I had been through Death Valley, and I remembered quick look up on the internet, and there it was, Badwater. So that was the plan. I'll go from the lowest point to the highest. Called the ranger back, and I was like, "Hey, has anybody ever gone from Death Valley?" And the guy laughed at me. He's like, "No, that's just insane." And I was like, "Perfect, just your guy." So I just planned it out. It took about a year of planning. At the time, I was swinging a hammer as a carpenter, a timber framer, and saved up some money and found a friend to drive my support vehicle. Found some people that would want to do the walk-in from where I stopped my bike ride. We called it the approach to the mountain, which
was Talkeetna, right?
Yeah, it started right outside Talkeetna. Yep. And there's an old mining road that goes, 20 miles back into the Petersville Hills, where I ditched my mountain bike and we walked in from there. In a lot of ways, that approach was, I think, one of the highlights of the trip. It's just to be where no human, it's not like
totally wild.
Totally, yeah. So walked in and did that. But yeah, that's how it came to be. And then it was just, I did a tiny bit of training. I had never climbed anything. One of the guys that was going to join us for the climbing thing had a climbing school up in the Adirondacks. And several years ago, he had tried Denali, but he got spanked from weather, which happens a lot on Denali. So he had a score to settle. So he was on board. And then I had a buddy from Fairbanks that wanted to get on board. He was a runner and an adventure guy. And then another young guy, rock climber that was just getting into climbing. And he's like, yes, I'm young. So I got the team together. Then it was just a matter of doing it. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I mean, first day in Death Valley, I'm like, I'm going to set my sport vehicle up. I'll see you in 150 miles.
Yeah.
And I'm like dying, and we learned maybe to keep it a little bit closer. And we learned a lot along the way. I got bronchitis in the Sierras. I got giardia in the Yukon. Lost about 15 pounds. But the ride, pulled off the ride, met those guys in Talkeetna. And the next thing you know, we're sort of slogging in to base camp. And it's just spectacular. You know that area. It's just incredible. And people along the way, it was funny, when I tell them what I was doing from the beginning, they would sort of laugh at you. But the further I got along in the trip, the more credibility I had because I was that farther along. So when I got to Talkeetna, they're like, oh, cool. Good luck on the mountain. Whereas, in the Sierras, they're like, right.
Yeah.
So,
it's like the first day on the bike trip and I stop at a convenience store and they're like, you're going to Alaska.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that fuels you, that, so it fuels you a little bit.
And then eventually you get so far that people don't believe you either. Like,
right.
You didn't come that far.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're like, look at these freaky tan lines on my legs. Nobody gets these from just walking around.
Yeah.
So we made it into base camp. Weather, we had like 3 storm days at high camp, I think, waiting. And that's usually where expeditions on Denali get clobbered is, weather just sits there and they run out of fuel or they run out of food and they got an option, give it a shot and go up top or be safe and go down. And unfortunately, a lot of them retreat. But weather worked for us and we summited on solstice. That's
wow.
my day, right?
Oh, wow.
That's
crazy.
Day we hold the Denali 135, 100K. And we summited on solstice. So, yeah, it's 25 years ago this past year. So
a fun little fact is we're sitting 26 floors up where we're doing this podcast.
Oh, nice.
And he was 20,000 feet, 320,
20,320. Yeah, they measured it differently nowadays, but yeah.
20,003. So
yeah.
I think you're a little bit scared of heights. If I were to
man, it's funny. I pulled up and I saw this big, tall glass building. I was like, oh shit. One of the reasons that I undertook that trip in the first place is, as you pointed out, I had done a lot of crazy stuff in the Navy. I was a pilot. In the civilian world, flight instructor, did some bush flying, jumped out of helicopters and swung around helicopters and did all kinds of crazy stuff. And years after that, all of that excitement, some crashes, some lost friends due to crashes and accidents, just came back to visit and started having freaky panic attacks while flying. That doesn't work real well. So I sort of changed gears, and that was in large part the reason I did that trip, was to
overcome the fear.
Yeah, just try and see what was going on. I thought, what's a good way? It was sort of a good analogy for where I'd been, right? I'd been in this low spot, like what the hell just happened to me, psychologically with these panic attacks, and I'm going to sort of take it back. So what better way to go from the lowest point to the highest point?
Yeah, it's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah, so showed up here. Thanks, 26 floors, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe this is the beginning of a new low to high,
Right, exactly. It's all good.
So what's it like? I'm sure very, very few people on Earth have ever had that experience of being at the summit of a mountain. So what is that? What is, like, goes through your head? What's kind of I imagine it's a very visceral experience.
It is. Denali's a spectacular mountain. You're above tree line from very low down because you're so far north.
And it's also considered one of the 7 peaks.
Yeah, one of the 7 summits. And
so the 7 summits is the 7 highest points on every continent.
Yes, sir.
So that's the North American.
And Denali's got an interesting sort of reputation because it is so far north and the weather is so fickle. There's probably about a 60% success rate every year. And it also has, even though it's 20,320, the oxygen up there is less than that. It's the equivalent of about a 23,000 foot mountain because you're so far north. And the atmosphere sort of bulges around the equator due to centrifugal force. So the further north you go, the less oxygen at higher latitudes. But it's spectacular. It's also the tallest. It's taller than Everest from its base.
Right. I've heard that. Yeah.
When we started, for me, I started 282 feet below sea level, but the base of Denali base camp is 7,200 feet. I think Everest, you're up 14 or you're up there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's spectacular. It's the route we climbed is a relatively non-technical route, but there are areas where you are exposed and you are, several thousand feet looking down, especially on summit day, where you get up on Denali's infamous summit ridge, which at times can be 10 inches wide. And it's a 9,000 foot drop on this side and it's 4,000 foot drop on this side. And it's a little intimidating. And it's a sort of serpentine looking dragon's back that goes for about a quarter of a mile to the summit. But unfortunately, because you can't breathe up there, the time needed to go from the beginning of that little sort of dragon's back to the summit could be a couple hours. So you're taking 2 steps,
taking a breath,
panting for 2 minutes, taking 2 more steps. So it's very laborious. I was out of my mind. I saw a car drive by at one point. I saw a couple climbers on the ridge coming at me, and I'm screaming at them over the wind, "There's not enough room," and there was nobody there. But once you summit, I was not being extremely comfortable at height. I'm looking around going, okay, it's time to get down. And too, the weather can move in very fast. So that was half of the mission that day. The rest was getting down. And I had a real tough time. I had spent everything I had to get to the summit. And, between losing so much weight on my bike trip and getting giardia, which was still affecting me, I was not 100%. So coming down was tough for me. And I think it was a 17-hour day. By the time we got back to high camp, I climbed in upside down in my sleeping bag, crampons still on, and I passed out.
Yeah. I think they say the descent oftentimes is harder than the ascent, right? Why? What's the?
Because you put everything into getting to the top.
Okay.
You're I'm going to get it. And
from a technical standpoint, though, is it like?
Not so much. It's mostly just about your energy expenditure. You're so focused on getting up there, and I'm going to do it. And then once you get up there, you realize maybe you didn't leave as much in the tank as you need to.
And I guess also,
or you get a little sloppy.
Yeah. And also, like the carrot's not at the end of the stick when you're going down.
Yeah. So I had a tough time getting down. And a lot of times in Denali, that's where people go. There's a famous section called the Audubon or Denali Pass where people just get tired and, they trip on their own crampon and they're gone. And it goes very far down to a place that nobody ever goes to. So there's a lot of people that got a little sloppy, a little lazy going down that are still there. So it was tough. Getting down was tough. But once you're through that and you start going further down the mountain, the beauty is you're getting oxygen back. And you feel like Superman. So every 1,000 feet you go down, you're picking up your different caches of equipment and fuel cans and empty food containers, and you're just feeling superhuman. Till you get on the lower part of the glacier, now it's starting to warm up. The crevasses, the snow bridges over the crevasses are soft, so you got to be super careful because you will, take falls through those. The snow bridges can only be 8 inches, 10 inches thick, and you step on it, and crevasses 500 feet deep. So yeah, once you get back to Talkeetna, then it's party on. It was funny. I don't know about funny. Eye-opening. We got to Talkeetna, and there was a couple guys on that summit ridge that we had met when we were getting ready to go out, and we said, go, 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 go. And they're like, no, this is our summit. And they're Spanish climbers. And we said, no, it's over there. You got to go up there. And they're like, no way. We're not going out on that. And we saw them later on in the Fairview.
Oh, wow.
And we were in there, beers, and they were just sitting in the corner. So sometimes you got to push yourself a little bit further than you think you need to. You know that.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like a fine line between pushing yourself when deep down, if you really tried, you can push it. But then it's also like, what's that line between pushing it and just being overly risk taking, and like that. I mean, I guess that's the beauty of the whole sport because it
is. And, it's a pretty organic, dynamic thing too. Like I have a daughter I didn't have way back then. So I was like, I'm going to give it all. And, it doesn't work out. That's how it was meant to be. But now with a little one, she's 11, you got to, it's a different formula now. So, you know when to reel it in a little bit.
That bar that you were saying, what's the name of it?
The Fairview.
The Fairview. That's, I believe, we got breakfast or lunch there or something, and you had like a something signed, right?
The Roadhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. He had it was like 25 year later. Yeah. Right. That was like 25 years.
So on the day after we summited, the day we summited, I tore a section of my stuff sack from my sleeping bag out, and we wrote,
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Death Valley to Denali expedition, first ever, lowest to highest, blah, blah, blah. And got some summit pictures. And then when we finally got down to Talkeetna, inside the Talkeetna Roadhouse, which is a historic restaurant and lodge, super cool place. Trish is the owner. All the sort of historic expeditions that have ever been on Denali are stapled up. Their flags are stapled from all around the world, Japanese, Korean, Russian, Polish, all these mountaineering expeditions flags. So I was honored that they asked if they could put ours. So it's still up there. And then when Bill and I did the first crossing of the Denali Highway, I was like, shit, man, let's take another red something and write the first crossing. So we've got 2 beat up old pieces of fabric with Sharpie on them in the Talkeetna Roadhouse.
Cool.
Great muffins, by the way. Trish. Great muffins, Trish.
Great food. Nice, man. That's something you'll always remember. Yeah. Was there anything you felt like you left on the table when you did that trip? I remember one thing you told me when I was on my trip was that you wished you did a lot more journaling.
Yeah. You know what? You're right. You're reliving it, and I'm sure you felt this way. As you're reliving it in the short term afterwards, it's all very fresh.
Yeah, right. You can remember every day, every event.
Yeah, and I've heard the same thing from like ocean rowers and other people that, do these crazy endurance things. And because it's so fresh and you're reliving it, you think that's going to be with you. And I found that it started to sort of, as I got back into the world of non-adventure stuff, just day-to-day stuff, it started to sort of dilute. and I would try and jot things down, but a lot was lost.
Gets blended together a little bit.
Gets blended together.
Yeah.
But then conversely, just the other day I was doing something and something sparked a memory that I hadn't had in 25 years. Like there I was in a particular place with a particular smell and sights. And I was like, wow. And I just jotted it down really fast. But I have some pretty good notes. And fortunately, those guys on the team took really good notes too. So, and we didn't have GoPros and cell phones. I mean, we had a cell phone. Verizon sponsored me, but the cell phone was like the size of a loaf of bread. And they gave us 3 batteries. And between the walk-in and the summit, we were on the mountain for a month. So sleeping with these giant batteries, just so when we summited, we could call our mothers and say we were okay. By the time we did, I think we had like 1/4 of 1 bar. It was like, hi, I'm alive. Got to go. Pass the phone to everybody.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any of that technology to record any of this stuff. So pen and paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, the evolution of adventures throughout history. Like, you think of the stuff when they first went to like Antarctica or the Arctic, like they were doing like celestial navigation and everything, and then eventually, they did a lot more. They had better maps. And so it just keeps evolving. And it's like a lot of times people are like, these kids don't know how to read a map, and it's like there's trade-offs. There's trade-offs. Like, definitely, like you now know a more efficient way to navigate. But at the same time, like having that kind of fundamental knowledge also, I'm sure, helps for trips like that when...
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
They were the real deal back in the day, though. I mean, I think about the early, especially Denali climbers. These guys were a bunch of... the sourdough expedition, for example, not to get too off topic, but a bunch of drunk miners and dog mushers in Fairbanks. I'll bet you can't get to the top of that thing. How much? I don't know, your dog and a jug of whiskey. Well, how are we going to know you're going to get up there? I'm going to put a spruce pole up on the top. And these guys set off across the tundra, like, early 1900s, And by God, they, by some accounts, may have pulled it off. There's evidence that they may have done it. And, those are the guys you give tons of credit to. I think the things that you did on your bike, it's amazing. And my trip was really fun. I think there's so much more of that to do, though. And that's one of the things I enjoy about putting on the Denali Ultras is that you're sort of just giving people the opportunity to do something really, really hard that will stay with them for the rest of their life in a place that's just absolutely spectacular. And because that race is a crew race where the runners each have crews, you're bringing your friends and family along with you. And it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, when you and I did our trips, we were by ourselves.
Yeah.
So you're in your head, Right. You're in your head and you're like, this sucks. If I get one more day riding straight into the wind, I'm going to shoot myself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, I remember, one of the parts that kind of got under my skin was, I enjoyed it, but it was like a love-hate thing. But like, I remember everyone would always call every day and it was great. I loved it, but it did get kind of exhausting after a while. But there was this one 300-mile stretch where just no service, no nothing. And I was like, this is like the best part of the whole trip, Yeah. But I think one thing that, having this like advanced technology does help with is like it opens people's eyes to all these places that they never before thought. Like, I'm fortunate that I love to read. So I have read about a lot of these like crazy adventures throughout the world, and I've learned that way. But having the ability to use your magic box and Google something, that really opens your eyes. Like, wow, that person did that. Like, I didn't know what the 7 summits were until I Googled it a couple, however long ago, so.
And there are people too that for whatever reason aren't able to do these things. So, that's another thing that I'm really aware of. And that's just a gratitude that, I'm able to go out tomorrow and try and run 100 miles and you're able to get on your bike. And that, as long as we're able to do those things, I think we can, because there will come a time that, we can't do that. And there are people that can't do that for whatever reason. So
it's like they can live vicariously through it.
Absolutely. And you know what? Everybody's got their own mountain to climb, everybody's got their own epic, and it's not my place to to tell anybody that they're lesser or whatever, because, theirs is different. And
Yeah.
so you're right. Being able to, follow along. I don't know if you've followed any of these ultra swimmers. You should get an ultra swimmer doing these like crazy ocean swims. And my ankles ever go, I'm going to jump on board and do one of this. But
I gotta learn. I know nothing about it. I'll have to do some research
stuff.
on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Farallon Islands to San Francisco, great white shark breeding ground of the world, sharks all around. I mean, yeah, it's cool stuff out there. And without that technology, we wouldn't sort of know about it.
Yeah. So there's something about adventures or the adventurous spirit that requires you to have a lot of grit. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that your time in the Navy certainly reinforced that into your psyche of like, no matter what the challenge is, no matter what the obstacle is, like I will overcome it. I just have to dig deep and do it. A lot of what we were saying before. Now, what was your experience in the Navy like? Because you did some, as a search and rescue swimmer, I imagine that's kind of an all-encompassing MOS. So like, what was that experience like?
Yeah. Hardcore training, a lot of training. The motto of SAR swimmers in the Navy and the Coast Guard, actually, it's kind of funny. You'd think it was the opposite, but the Navy had rescue swimmers before the Coast Guard, and they used to go to our school. But the motto for all the rescue swimmers is so others may live. And basically, you were trained to do anything and everything you needed to do to bring somebody back from a bad situation, probably the worst day of their life. And if it meant, you doing your thing, losing your life, that's what it meant. So we trained, really hardcore for that. All conditions, you see these hurricanes roll through down south of here, and those are rescue swimmers pulling people out of swollen rivers. Mine was a little different. I was on the West Coast, and I was assigned to an aircraft carrier. And so all of our rescues were people getting blown overboard, at sea rescues, commercial shipping vessels on fire, explosions, pulling badly injured people off. A lot of plane crashes, a lot of helicopter crashes. Our own squadron, we lost a lot of helicopters just in normal day-to-day training. And I was in during peacetime, tail end of the Cold War, so we had trained to a super high level. But, a lot of crashes, a lot of close calls, myself and others. And so you just needed to be on the money. And, we did, everybody says, oh, you guys were the SEALs. No. We did a totally different thing. Our thing was to bring people back, and I have a lot of respect for the teams. We went through a lot of the same training, but it's just a totally different vibe. And it's kind of funny, not a lot of people knew about the rescue swimmers because obviously the spec warfare guys got a lot of the attention, but I loved it. It was a great experience. At a young age, you get to do some just crazy fun stuff. Those guys are my brothers. We'll always be tight wherever we are in the world. If phone rings, hey man, I need you, we'll be there.
Yeah. And
I feel a lot of that in the endurance, sport community too. There's a lot of that camaraderie because you've been through shit. You've dug deep when you needed to get stuff done. So I think that played a big part in, again, just sort of ushering me to ultimately doing some endurance stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of kind of going back to what we were talking about before about the mental aspect, like I feel like that line of work requires you to be more mentally tough, or maybe not more, but there has to be a symbiosis between your mental toughness and your physical. Like you have to be a peak shape, but I feel like you can't kind of discount the mental aspect.
Yeah, well, the training was, you're not going to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you fail, someone's going to die.
Right.
And so your job is to bring them out, even if you have to, sacrifice yourself in order to save that little kid who's floating down a swollen, rain-swollen river. Or a shipmate at one of my rescues was my squadron mates crashed into the ocean and going to what we thought was a man overboard, which turned out to be a bag of trash. But, they crashed and we fished them all out. And had I not done what I was trained to do, then somebody dies.
Yeah.
So not to make it sound all heavy, but I think, yeah, you're right. That carries through. And it also comes at a price, It comes at a price when, things get a little goofy and you get a little bound up there and start having anxiety and PTSD issues. And I think you'll find in the endurance world that a lot of people that had those experiences from whatever circumstances before look to endurance sports as a way of sort of healing and community and, just reconnecting with yourself, because there's a ton of people out there that are doing endurance sports for reasons other than they want to just go beat themselves up for 24 hours.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know the science behind it, but I know when you run and you do like hardcore exercise like that, it is whatever the neurotransmitters are, like releases stress and everything. So
absolutely,
that was actually a question I was going to ask. My dad was in the Army.
Yep.
I know a lot of people.
Thanks for your service, Dad. Even though he's an Army guy, Dad.
Go Army, be Navy, right?
That's
no.
Right.
So like, I know a lot of people in the military personally, like my friends. I know a lot of his friends were in the military, and mental health is a pretty serious thing, I think.
Yeah.
And so the mental health of our veterans, I don't think is where it should be.
Yeah. So
my question to you is, what advice would you give, having gone through this elite training, this elite experience as a SARS swimmer? Like, what is it that's kind of universal among all military people? Where do they find hope? Like, where do they clear their mind?
Great question. And if anybody's interested to sort of look into this more, there's another swimmer that just got out, just made a movie that just circulated the country, Hell or High Water, a swimmer named Taylor Geiger. Great flick in his struggle with PTSD post-service. And I think first and foremost is that, and you get the same camaraderie in endurance sports, is that you're never alone and that you've got brothers and sisters that have experienced similar things, and just to reach out. In the military in particular, I think they're starting to figure out ways to unwind people. I think people that are trained super high stress, high energy MOSs or jobs in any branch get out, and the civilian world's a bit alien. We're ready to go. We are super tightly wound springs ready to do what we were taught to do. And you don't think that when you're 21. You're like, I did all this fun stuff. But it does come back to you in ways that you can't foresee. And I'm flying along one night as a commercial pilot, and just waves of panic came in. What the hell? I thought somebody spiked my coffee. I thought it was like being drugged. So there are better systems in place now in the military to help people sort of reacclimate to the civilian world. And I think that's super important. But going back to the non-military people, just, people that are having a tough time, and we all go through it, especially the past 3 years, it's just finding fellowship and finding community. And I think physical exertion and pushing yourself a little bit and getting into some of these dark corners that we don't have access to otherwise, until you just break everything else down, gives you really wonderful insight into how great we all are and how much potential we all have. And you're able to do that in a community of like-minded, really awesome people.
Sure. And another thing is, like, you mentioned this earlier, but an adventure doesn't have to be 100K.
Absolutely not.
Like, I think something that a lot of people fall into when they get depressed is they come back and into civilian life, and they realize, like, none of these people understand, like, the sacrifices I made. Like, they don't even care. They don't give a shit, Yep. And so that's like really, I can only imagine how difficult that is to cope with. So for them, maybe their achievement is, maybe I'll just go to the gym 3 days a week or 5
could
or
be
whatever.
Getting out of bed.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody could have, debilitating ailment that is just getting up and going to see the sunrise. You know what I mean? And so everybody's got their own race. Everybody's got their own ultra. And that's my new buzzword is everybody needs to find their own epic. What is your epic?
Yeah.
And
just build off of it.
They're all going to be different.
Yeah.
Take a lot of pride in just taking the first step or action to figuring out what that is for yourself.
Pretty heavy.
That's right, dude. I'm going to be replaying this tomorrow, like mile 70, whatever.
Yeah.
Saturday night. I don't even know what that is.
Let's move to something a little bit lighter hearted.
Yeah, man.
You have a distillery.
Right.
How did this whole thing come to be?
Balance, baby. It's all about the balance, right? You can't just be, working out and running all the time. It was kind of a weird thing, just like a lot of things in our lives. We maybe lose a little bit of passion for something we're doing and want to just spritz things up a little. I had been doing some barn stuff after my flying career sort of got hijacked. I started timber framing and working on barns. I had done it a lot when I was younger in high school with a family friend. I started a company and we converted old antique timber frame barns. Magnificent houses. I designed them. I had this sort of crazy new creative part of me open up when my pilot control thing sort of took back seat, which was really wonderful. And I had been doing that for 20 years. And I started to get maybe a little burned out of it. Had some big giant projects were huge, just massive, multi-year, multi-million-dollar, big giant barn houses. And I was just getting a little burned out. And some of my carpenters one Christmas gave me a little still. I had taught them how to make beer the previous Christmas, got them homebrew kits. And the next thing you know, they got me a little still. And it sat in my closet, and I didn't do anything with it. And I was coming back from a vacation on the plane. I'm reading an article about the rise of craft distilleries, and I was like, oh, yeah, I got that thing in my closet. I'm going to see if I can make some rum or something. So I started playing around with it. Next thing you know, I'm making some stuff. I was during the recession, 2007, and different states were starting these new little licenses available for people to start distilleries. So I started super small, making spirits. I was using reclaimed wood from our barns because I didn't have access to barrels yet. So I was using old wood, which turned out to be kind of cool because it imparted a whole different kind of flavor profile on the spirits. And got to the point where the barn company and the distillery were demanding more of my attention than I could give them both. So I had to make the call. So I stepped off and went all in on the distillery. So I love it. It's great fun. It's a totally different world. Everybody comes in with a smile on their face. They leave with a smile on their face.
Probably a bigger smile than they
bigger smile on their
in,
face. Yeah. And it's kind of recession proof. And it's been fun. It's been real fun.
So the interesting thing about distillery is the high alcohol content, which during the last couple of years during this thing, I think it was called COVID, you were making
the C word.
You were helping out making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, man.
Which is a pretty clever use of resources there. So how did that happen?
Yeah, we were looking to move our distillery from where we had started to a bigger location. And so we had sort of stashed a whole bunch of spirits, super high proof, basically moonshine. It was whiskey before it turns into bourbon. In anticipation of shutting down our operation and moving to that, we wanted to have product on hand. And right as that started to happen, the COVID thing, we had all this product, and a couple small distilleries around the country saw that coming, and sanitizer started to get really, really hard to come by. And so a bunch of us started jumping on board. I mean, there's not much difference, I hate to say it, other than a little glycerin and some hydrogen peroxide and a little bittering agent. So yeah, we were real quick on board to help out with that. The original plan was to donate 20% to first line.
Oh yeah.
Hospitals and doctors' offices, first responders. But what happened is the word got out on the radios So like we'd give it to a local firehouse, and then they'd call a firehouse, and then these guys have a sanitizer. And the next thing you know, there's a mile-long line of ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, and you can't say no. So we gave away about 80% that we made, but we sold the 20% that we did sell. We sold to
Marked up.
Yeah, we marked it up to cover it, and they were to what they call them, essential businesses, like company that made seals for pumps for nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
So they had the cash, and they basically helped foot the bill for that. So it was good, and we got a lot of good social karma out of it at the same time, you know.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And is that, so that's still in operation, right?
No, we stopped the sanitizer.
No, I mean the distillery.
Oh, distilleries, yeah, we're still rocking.
What is it? You guys got a website or?
Oh yeah,
or
Hewn Spirits, Hewn Spirits, HEWN, like to craft or create by hand, and it's kind of a shout out to my previous life as a timber frame guy. We're also doing a kind of a cool mashup. We're starting to get into canned, ready to drink cocktails. Partnered with Chris Kosman of Adventure Corps, the Badwater races, and we're doing my history of Badwater, his history of Badwater. We're creating a whole line of, here's my pitch.
Yeah.
We're creating a whole line of Badwater beverages. We've got a Badwater tart cherry vodka soda. We're doing some electrolyte drinks. We've got Badwater whiskey. And it's a cool thing, because we both have this history and this connection to this really special place. So that's fun. And they'll be hitting the street here pretty soon.
Is that something that, I guess it's a little funky with spirits, but is that something you can get online or?
Yeah. That's going to be primarily how we're going to be getting it out there. We'll have distribution on the West Coast, the East Coast, like bricks and mortar, but yeah, online stuff.
All right. Well, this is where you'll,
Badwater
beer. You heard it here first. Yeah.
Non-alcoholic beer. We're going to have non-alcoholic beer, regular beer, all sorts of good stuff. Maybe even a coffee, you know. It's the whole Badwater
there we go.
life.
It's an adventure.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So I always like to leave it on kind of a philosophical note. So you've been through some crazy adventures in all walks of life, whether it's the military, Death Valley to Denali, the ultra endurance. You've been through a lot of very eclectic experiences for your children and for people who look up to you. Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to be remembered?
Man, Jono, that's good. I think I'd like to be remembered as somebody that just tried to live it all. You know, do as best as I could to live a full, rich life as possible, and inspire others to do the same. I mean, be it, you know, lost friends, shipmates in the Navy, people that we lose in our lives, people that aren't able to do these things, ride their bike from Jersey to Alaska or go from death. You know, it's almost as though we have an obligation to do things. And again, it doesn't have to be so extreme, but to just live your life as fully as you can. And that, you know, I try and impress that on my 11-year-old. It's a little hard because she has all the answers. She has all the answers. But I really think that's it, because we are here, and we do have that luxury and that ability to get up in the morning and to take another step and to do things that maybe we think we're not capable of doing. So hopefully in the things that I do and that other people do in the endurance world, you know, it's about inspiring people. You know?
Sure. Seize the day.
Yeah, man.
Sean Tracy, everyone. Thanks so much, man.
My
Thanks
pleasure
for coming on.
Thanks. Good to see you, Jono.
Yeah, man.